In this video, I'll be showing you how to finish off the installation of your plastic part accessories. First thing I'll show you is how I remove the tape that is protecting the plastic parts from your epoxy resin steps. I use the same router jig template that I used before and use some double-sided tape to secure the jig directly over my leash plug and vent. Then I used the smallest router bit that I had and adjusted the height of the router so that it would just barely stick out above the template. My goal was just to route out enough of the material so that I could pull the tape portion off cleanly. On one of my passes I went a little too deep and you can see some of the black plastic shards coming off the router, which is still completely fine. You might be wondering, couldn't I have just added these accessories after the whole board was hot coated? And the answer is yes, you can also do that. I chose to do it this way because it can be a little bit stronger of a bond if some of that fiberglass is actually holding your accessory down. Okay, once you're done with your leash plugs, let's move on to the air vent. I used the same technique to remove the tape and then used a drill bit to ensure that the hole was running through into the hollow cavity of the board. You might even hear a release of pressure when doing this step because your board is technically an airtight structure now after you've applied all that epoxy and fiberglass around it. If you're using a Gore-Tex vent like this board is, screw that vent cap on using just hand pressure and your board should be able to breathe now, and that Gore-Tex layer within the vent cap will prevent water from entering. If you're using a manual vent like I'll show in a future video, you'll have to remember to open and close that vent screw before and after using your board on the water, but then there's no risk of any mechanical failure with a plastic part. Next, I took an orbital sander and some light sandpaper over my fin box until I was able to pry that piece of tape off of the opening using a sharp tool. One accessory that we still need to insert is our handle. Remember, we added that wood blocking underneath our board so that we can add a carrying handle. So first I located the two tiny pinholes I marked that show where my screws need to go. Then I drilled a pilot hole through the fiberglass and then carefully used a 1/4 by 20 drill tap bit that actually cuts the threads directly into the internal wood blocking material that my machine screws will grab onto. I'm also a fan of leatherworking, so I wanted to test this method of using a leather strap and some grommets as my handle and attach it with some stainless steel machine screws and a rubber O-ring. I really like how it turned out, and because it's removable with the tapped holes, I can change out the handle style whenever I want. I'll probably make another one of these that has 2 layers of leather stitched together for a little added strength when carrying. If you're using a plastic handle or don't have a drill tap set like this, you can also just attach your handle using regular stainless steel screws into that blocking material as well. I'd recommend using solid 1-inch long screws here, just don't drill all the way through your wood blocking underneath. It's also best practice to add a little bit of epoxy into that freshly drilled hole that will penetrate into the wood hole and keep it from taking on any moisture. And finally, I'll be tying the bungee cord cargo system around my leash plugs I inserted into the front of my board. To do this, I cut a piece of 1/8 inch bungee cord material, the length needed to span my cargo system, leaving some extra to make tying the cords together easier. I found the best way to tie the two ends of your bungee cord together is using a knot called a Zeppelin bend. You can just Google that if you need a little extra help with the knot. Also, if you want your bungees to be nice and tight to hold your cargo down, it's helpful to pull the cord as tight as you want it before tying the ends together, and then apply some masking tape at the corners to hold that tension in place. That way you have some extra slack to work with to tie the knot. And that's it for this step of the process. So in the next and final video of the series, we're going to be finishing the board with a coat of marine spar varnish to add a little UV protection and a beautiful shine to our final product.